Hello my loves, welcome back. Today I want to talk to you about how you can read more. I feel like this is a topic that is very relevant when looking at the increase of competitiveness almost in reading when it comes to online forums and discussions of reading. So whether that's TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, whatever it is, it seems like, I definitely feel like anyway, there's this growing feeling of like, oh my god, everyone's reading so much. Why am I not reading that much? I need to be reading more. I just want to preface this by saying, I'm not talking about it in that sense. I don't think it's realistic for the majority of people to read 100 books in a year. I don't think it's realistic for people to push themselves to keep reading just to keep up with these trends or sort of what they're seeing other people say online about how much they're reading. This is more looking at if you are a reader and you're feeling burnt out, but either because of that competitiveness or just, you know, for whatever reason yourself. It could be the demands of life, it could be mental health, it could be anything. Just feeling burnt out and like you can't do that reading that you want to do and that you enjoy doing, and doing it for yourself, not because you feel like you should be reading 200 books in a year. That is what I want to help with. That is what I want to talk about today, is how to actually keep that habit going and keep that consistent and realistic for you, because everyone reads different amounts. Some people might genuinely be able to read and enjoy reading 100 books in a month. that's fine if that's what you want to do. But for a lot of people, that's just either not possible because of, you know, your own reading abilities, or it's not possible because of all of the other things going on in life. Or it might just not be desirable. There are other things that we want to do as well. It's not all just about reading. Also, just like brief little side note, some of these are things that have just generally worked for me personally, and therefore I could see working for other people as well. However, my personal education and professional background is in psychology, so some of these things that I'm mentioning do come from that and various different psychological therapies to increase positive behaviors and things that make you feel better. So some of this is just things that have helped me and have no scientific backing. Other things, there is sort of some level of research behind why they're helpful and that I've learned through my studies and through my working life. So firstly, we need to work out what the problem is. So you've decided that you want to read more, or you're not reading as much as you would like to be or would aim to be reading. But we need to work out why that's happening to begin with. I mean, we don't necessarily have to, but I think that's a really helpful place to start with. So some common things might be lack of available time. You know, if you work full time, if you have kids, if you're studying, you know, there's so many different things that can then make our hobbies or things that we enjoy feel less important and like they don't need to be prioritized. So it could be just not having the opportunity. It could be struggling with motivation. If you know, you're either having a bit of reader burnout or you're not being able to find books that you connect with and enjoy, that motivation might not be there, or you might be experiencing, you know, some mental health difficulties that are then affecting that motivation. Similarly, concentration is something that can quite often have that same impact. You want to read, but you just can't. No, like you feel like you're trying and just nothing's going in. That can be incredibly frustrating and then just sort of leads to more of that avoidance and burnout. It could be that the things you're choosing to read just aren't resonating with you and therefore you don't have that interest in reading them, or you're getting through them really slowly. It could be that the format that you're reading doesn't work for you, so whether that's print, ebook, audiobook, whatever, you know, it could be that that's not working anymore. Or it could be availability of books. You know, it could be that actually you can't access them the way that you would like to. There could be so many different reasons or what you identify the problem as, but if it's one of those things, great, because I have organize the video into tips for all of those different things. If it's not one of those things, then just take some time and think about Why am I not reading? What is it that's stopping me? When I go to sit down and I think I'm going to read today, what is it that's getting in the way of me doing that? Is it myself and something going on inside of me? Is it an external contributor or factor? What is it? What's going on there? I will just say I have probably through various times in my life experienced all of these things. At the moment, I'm probably mostly struggling with the motivation side of things and the general executive functioning skills to be able to do it. Very much experiencing that thing of wanting to do something but physically not being able to get myself to. So, you know, I do understand all of these things definitely, and that's why I'm saying some of these things have helped for me. I'm not saying it's gonna fix everything, but you never know, some of these things might be helpful. So you figured out what the problem is, or maybe you're still trying to work that out, but regardless, the next thing to look at is where do you want to be? And you can look at this in an ideal sense if you want. Look at that end goal of how much you want to be reading, and that could either be how long you want to be reading a day, how many pages you want to read or chapters, or it could be more like how many books you want to read in a month, how many books you want to read in a year. That's fine, but some sort of goal to work towards can be really, really helpful. Now, once you have that, I want you to actually change that. I want you to look at what is actually realistic. Let's go through a personal example of what I mean. So about 2 years ago, I think, is when I started getting back into reading. I'd always read as a child and as a teenager. I read an awful lot. And then throughout uni and starting work, I just kind of stopped. And then 2022 was when I was like, I'm gonna get back to reading. So I got Goodreads and all of that. And I set a goal for myself of like, I think it was like 20 books that I wanted to read that year, which to some of you that may sound like a really, really small amount. But for someone who hadn't read properly for years, that was a pretty big goal, considering I genuinely don't remember before that when I had read a book for fun and not for like an essay I was writing or something like that. I set this goal for myself and was like, yeah, that'll be easy. I used to read all the time. This is gonna be fine. And I think I read like 5 books in the whole year because that was not a realistic goal from where I was starting from. It might be that in the future I wanted to read that many books, and that is what I did last year. I smashed my goal, although I did also not work very much last year, so. But starting with such a high number was just not realistic. It's the same as like saying, right, I haven't read for a month, I'm gonna pick up the Silmarillion and read 200 pages of it today. Like, that's just not, it might, you know, maybe you could do that, but in a lot of cases, when we're setting these like really big goals for ourselves, we are setting ourselves up to fail. It is much better to set a really small goal for yourself that you know for definite you can achieve, even if inside you're saying, I could read so much more than that. And yeah, you might have the capability to, when you look at when you're in, you know, your best reading mood, but can you right now? And actually, is that an overwhelming goal to set? If your goal is to read, I don't know, 50 books in this year and you haven't read for a long time, or you've been going through burnout and just really struggling with reading, would it be more realistic to change that to like 25 or even less than that? Set yourself a piss easy goal that you know you can achieve, because what happens is when we achieve a goal, we get a little boost of, I was gonna say adrenaline, it's not adrenaline. We get a little boost of those chemicals that make us feel good, that make us feel happy, and it reinforces, oh, I can do this, so I'll keep going and I'll set myself a slightly bigger goal next time. If we set ourselves a massive goal and we don't do it, it reinforces the, yeah, I can't read anymore. Yeah, I'm in a slump. Yeah, all of this negative stuff. So set your long-term goal, break that down into a smaller goal, or revise that, half it, whatever it is, make it realistic. And just remember, because I think a lot of us can get stuck then on or I did definitely. Well, I used to read so much. This seems like a pathetic goal to be setting for myself. I should be able to do more than this. And yeah, you might be able to do more than that in the future, but right now, anything is an improvement from not reading at all. Even if it's just one book, that's still better. Even if it's just one chapter, that's still an improvement to where you might have been before. So try and focus on that change and improvement rather than comparing on what you were able to do, you know, months, years, however long ago. Right, so you have diagnosed the problem, you have set yourself a goal, but the problem is still there, obviously. So how do we get from that problem to that goal? I'm going to break these down into those categories that I mentioned at the beginning. Some of these might have overlap. There might be some sort of other things that come through, but predominantly I'm going to focus on those sort of different problems that might be there at the beginning. So firstly, if you've realised it's a time issue, obviously this can be one that is a little bit more difficult, depending on what is taking up your time. What I want you to do, firstly, if you really want to read more and it's something that you know makes you feel better and that you enjoy, but you just feel like you don't have time for it genuinely, I want you to record what you're doing every day for a week or 2 weeks, whatever your schedule's like, whatever a general routine is like for you, a week, 2 weeks, a month, whatever makes sense for you. Record what you're doing, literally the time you wake up, every activity that then fills your day, even if it's like the commute to work or it's preparing breakfast, whatever it is, write it down with timestamps so you can look at where you are spending your time, and then you can start to see if changes can be made, because we might think that we know what we're doing a lot of the time, but quite often we don't. How much time do I spend scrolling on my phone where I could be reading instead? How much time do I think, oh, I've just got half an hour before this thing, so I'm just gonna, sit and scroll on my phone or watch some YouTube video that I don't really care about that much because it doesn't feel like an actual block of time. There are quite often these little blocks of time that we write off as something we can't do something in, or also because we're tired and burnt out, we might be making use of time in ways that feel less effortful but actually don't make us feel better. And doing something that you enjoy, like reading in that time instead, can actually boost our energy and make us feel more productive, happier, all of those good things, because we're engaging in an activity we enjoy. But also you might find that there are tasks in there that aren't as necessary as you thought. So obviously there are going to be some things we have to do, like work or childcare or cooking, things like that we have to do. But there might be some things that you realize actually don't need to be done at a certain time or don't always need to be done by you. And this is where prioritizing tasks can come in very helpful. So what I want you to remember is that you doing something for yourself that you enjoy, in this case reading, is very important and should be a priority, one of your priorities. Obviously don't neglect things to read if possible, but your well-being is incredibly important and it's something that we can quite often put last. And if we're approaching reading as an enjoyable activity that makes you feel better and that you enjoy and, all of that good stuff, it should be a priority. I know that's a lot easier said than done, and I know a lot of us can carry guilt for making time for those things when, there's washing up to be done, or there's clothes to be washed, or there's an essay to plan, or whatever it is. But if we are constantly putting off those enjoyable things, our brains are not going to function as well. We're going to be more grumpy, we're going to be more sad and irritable, and those other things, we're not going to do them as well. You're not going to concentrate as well on an essay if you're not taking time to look after yourself. I don't know how you can do washing up wrong, actually. You're just going to be feeling crapper and crapper over time. So actually taking that half an hour to read or whatever, instead of doing that for a day, isn't the end of the world. And actually those things will still be there tomorrow, but you looking after yourself is important. Take your well-being and your hobbies as one of your priorities And then look at your diary or your log of things that you've done and look at, are there any unnecessary things here that I could cut out? Or are there any things I could delegate to other people? Are there any things that I could do at a different time? Or is there any rearranging of my time that I could do so that I have a longer block of time rather than these short little 10 minutes, 5 minutes between doing things that I could then dedicate to reading? And remember, any time spent reading is better than none. So even if it is only 10 minutes, that's still 10 minutes of reading. That's still good. We don't need to be spending 8 hours a day reading classics to be a reader, you know? Whenever is good. I think just making that log and you look at it and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I can make some changes here. Quite often that's enough in itself, but just like play around with it and see if any time is already there that you weren't aware of, if there's any time that can be found, or if there are any tasks that you're doing that are taking up your time that actually aren't important to you, aren't necessary, or aren't bringing you, I was about to say aren't bringing you joy. Any tasks in there that don't align with what you think is important or a valued activity to you, if you can drop them and spend that time reading instead. If your problem is concentration, this one I appreciate can be one of the most frustrating ones because the motivation is there, the opportunity is there, everything is set up right for you to be able to read, and then you just feel like you can't. I completely get it. It's so frustrating, and I feel like all of us will deal with this at some point in our lives. I have ADHD. This is something I've recently found out about myself. I understand concentration difficulties is all I'm saying, and I don't want people to feel like I'm like minimizing how difficult concentrating can be, because I know that it is. However, concentration is very much like a muscle in the way that if we don't use it and train it, it's gonna be weak and it's not going to be at the level that we want it to be. So similarly to my weak you can't even see my arms because this shirt's so baggy, but similar to my weak ass arm muscles, I do absolutely nothing, strength training, anything to make my arms any stronger. So I can't be frustrated if I can't pick up a heavy thing. Similarly, if we're not using our concentration, or, you know, we've had a bit of burnout or we've been sick or something like that that has ruined our concentration a little bit, we need some time to build it back up. Exactly the same way as if you'd had an injury or you'd been sick and not been able to go to the gym for a while, you then need to build that stamina and muscle back up because it doesn't just keep doing it by itself. Concentration is very similar to that, and there are going to be a lot of different things that affect it. But if we're able to make these like small adaptations to build it back up, it's still gonna feel a bit frustrating, but it means that we can sort of get back to that place without just giving up. The thing that is most helpful for this is work out what your current concentration level is. If you can read a page and that's it, that's all you're gonna do. If it's easier to count it in minutes, if you can read for 5 minutes and that's it, that's all you're gonna do. You are gonna ideally set your task or set your goal to be read as much or slightly less than your current concentration limit, which sounds ridiculous. I appreciate being like, I'm gonna sit down and read a page. That sounds pointless, but you do that, you have a break, you come back, you read another page, and you kind of keep doing that. And over time, just like if I started lifting, I don't know anything about weights. If I started lifting like 1 pound, is that a lot? If I started lifting 1 kilo weights, it might feel easy to begin with, but the more I do it, the more muscle is gonna, you know, the more my body is gonna get used to it, and then I'm gonna be able to move on to 2 kilos, 3 kilos, whatever. I know nothing about weightlifting, just as a disclaimer. I don't know if that's a lot or not. I'm thinking about a bag of sugar. I don't think that is very much. Anyway, exactly the same. You would start with the smallest weights and you would move up to the bigger ones. You wouldn't just jump straight for the big weights because your arms would snap off, wouldn't they? It's the same with concentration. Start with the least that you can do, or like the most that you can do comfortably. and then like before the frustration kicks in, and then just keep doing that, and slowly you will find that you will be able to concentrate for longer. Alternatively, it might be about looking at what you're reading. Can you find something that's easier to read, like a magazine, a short story, some poetry, a book that you've already read that you enjoy and you know the story quite well? Are there any things like that that are going to be easier for you to read and you don't have to commit to concentrating for such a long time? Do that until your concentration is like back again. And I appreciate this is going to ebb and flow at times, so I think one of the biggest things as well is don't be too hard on yourself when your concentration is lacking. It happens to all of us, it can happen for so many different reasons, and putting that pressure on yourself to try and read more is not going to help. It's just going to make you feel worse. You're going to feel more stressed and your concentration is going to be even worse. So just allow yourself those breaks. Just accept I'm having a time when my concentration is not good. I'm not going to be able to read as much, and that's okay. I will come back to it when I can, and you'll be fine. Just try and sort of release some of that pressure on yourself and that stress around it, and build that concentration back up slowly. All right, then, what are you reading? Because what you're reading may be having an impact on how much you're reading. This is definitely what happened to me last year, towards the end of last year, beginning of this year, and I've briefly mentioned it a couple of times, I think, but the books that I was reading, I just wasn't really enjoying. I was like either reading them because I felt like they were the kind of books that were popular and that other people were enjoying, or I was reading them just because I almost got into a habit of being like, I just need something easy and quick to read, which meant I was reading a lot of shitty romance and shitty fantasy, and I have no problem with shitty romance and fantasy. Sometimes that's really enjoyable, and I know a lot of people really, really love that. I'm sorry for calling it shitty. I've realised that's just not something that I particularly enjoy. I like it sometimes. I can like get into it and appreciate the silliness and like something a little bit more lighthearted, but generally I've learned that that is not what I enjoy reading most of the time. So just have a look at your reading choices and think, am I reading these things because I genuinely enjoy them? Am I taking something from them? Are they meaning something to me? Are there emotions coming up? Or whatever it means to you to enjoy a book. Just look at if you are actually enjoying them. And even if you are enjoying them, sometimes books are heavy. Sometimes books come with too much emotion, and you might need a break from that. So just consider your reading choices, and if actually there are things that, do you need to branch out and try different genres? Do you need to maybe revisit something that you already know that you really like? Could you take some recommendations from friends or people online who typically tend to read things that you enjoy? Just take some time to consider if it might be beneficial to try something different. Because I think yes, we can enjoy certain genres more than others, and therefore we might tend to gravitate towards them more than others. Within genres, there are always going to be certain similarities between books. I'm not saying all books are going to be the same, but I think some genres lead to that more than others. And after a while, they just become very samey and very predictable, and therefore that enjoyment has gone from them. And any genre can kind of lead to that. I suppose it depends on, again, what you're picking within that, but if it's feeling like things are just samey, or you're bored and therefore that motivation, that interest is gone, maybe have a look at some different things. Can you try different things? Would that help? And then also, how are you reading? Because I think the format that you read in is actually really important, and how everyone reads is different. And I do just really want to stress that listening to an audiobook is reading. Even though you're not using your eyes, it is still reading and a very valid form of reading. Look at what you've been reading recently and what format you've engaged with it in, and maybe try and make some comparisons. For example, I have tried audiobooks so many times and I just can't concentrate on them. And I know you're about to say, well, Nikki, have you tried just listening to them for 5 minutes and then slowly building up your concentration? Take your own advice. But I think this is a slightly different thing to that. This is more about how brains process information, and my brain really struggles with processing auditory information. I find it much easier to take in and digest written information, and that goes for communication, social, all of that as well. It just processes much easier. But then, you know, I appreciate the reverse can be true as well. Print can be very difficult to concentrate on, access, have space for, to house books. There are so many different reasons that a certain format might not work for you. I think especially on TikTok, there's like the whole, I can't think of how to describe it, but like the gang of people who love their Kindles, which is fine. I do have a Kindle and I do like reading on it. It's almost like influencers, like with all the, I just got the sage green Kindle, look at all my stickers on my Kindle, I've put a pop socket on my Kindle, I can change the wallpaper on my Kindle, I can read whatever I want, I can carry 20,000 books around on my Kindle. Like it's almost like very marketing like. It can feel like sometimes, and I don't think that's necessarily the intention. I'm not saying that people who make videos like that are sat there like trying to get people to buy Kindles, because honestly I don't think they really care. I think they're genuinely just making book content and talking about the fact that they like their Kindle, which is fine. But I think especially as someone who is very easily influenced, it can feel very much like, oh, I need to get a Kindle then because everyone's reading on Kindle, and that might just not be for you. That's fine. You might love Kindle and only want to read on that. Just find what feels most comfortable for you, how you can read the easiest and, you know, quickest if you particularly care about that. But whatever's most engaging for you, that's the main thing. And if it's a mix of those things, if sometimes you like to listen to an audiobook, sometimes you like to bring your Kindle, sometimes you like to print, it might depend on the book itself as well. That's absolutely fine. Just find the format that works for you. I just want to touch briefly on like if the problem is actually a lack of being able to get books. That could be for different reasons. It could be just not having very good access like near you in terms of like bookstores or libraries or whatever, or it could be like financial, not being able to spend money on books. And I do feel like that's something as well, that there's not just the competition there of, oh my god, I've read all of these books. There's also the thing of, I just bought 500 books, which is just not possible for everyone. And that's legit, that's fine. We're in a cost of living crisis and books can be very expensive. So looking at if that's the problem, I suppose at least there are some potentially easy solutions. I'm not saying that it's gonna fix everything, but you know, it's still possible to read even with those things. It's a shame that I'm not going to go on a capitalist rant. I'm not going to do it, don't worry. Firstly, if it's financial or if just nearby to you there isn't good places to get books, there is the Libby app, which I personally have not used much, but I know a lot of people love it. You do need a library card, I think, to be able to use it. In the UK, at least, you can just apply for library cards online now, though, and they just give you, like, the digital number, so you don't actually need to physically go into a library to get it. But I think you need that, and then you basically, it's like a library, but online. You just borrow them either in ebook or audio format, and sort of you have that window to then read them. The reason I haven't really used it much is because, well, one, I just don't think to use it when I'm thinking of reading a book. I very rarely think to check on there, and I found in the past when I have checked on there, a lot of the books that I've wanted haven't been there, or there have been quite long waits for getting books. So I would say if you are going to solely rely on that, and I know people who use it a lot, do just sort of check regularly, and if there's a book that you want to read that has like a long waiting list for it, just like make sure you're constantly adding yourself to those so that you can then sort of get them as soon as they're available. There is also, of course, physical libraries though. I feel like physical libraries are being forgotten a little bit, and that might just be like on the online book community where it is more focused on like hauls and stuff like that. But libraries are great. Please support your local libraries. Not just are they amazing for books, they usually have so many other things going on in them, and it's really sad to see libraries being really quiet or things being cancelled at libraries. So please do make use of your local library if you have one. They might not always have everything you want, but there will still be a decent selection, and you can always just ask if they're planning on getting something in or if it's possible to get it in from another library. Library staff are great. They're always really friendly and really nice. So if that's possible, obviously again, that's another way to get books for free. You just have sort of a window that you need to have read the book by. I suppose that's the only annoying thing, having to go and bring them back, but you can still get access to books and they're free and there's loads of them, and you're supporting a fantastic part of the community. So use libraries, please. This might not be the best in terms of like financial, but if you already have Spotify, I appreciate if you don't, then this isn't really helpful in the financial sense because Spotify is expensive. But if you already have it, they have added audiobooks to Spotify now. I think there's a certain limit to how long you can listen to it for, which is kind of annoying. However, people have uploaded audiobooks on there before as like podcasts, so I don't think that counts under the cut off. But if you already have that, that's a way to get access to audiobooks without having to pay for Audible, which I know is like the main one. Or I think, and I don't know if this is legit, so I don't know if I should be recommending this, but I do think sometimes there are audiobooks on YouTube that people have uploaded. I've mainly seen that with fan fiction, actually thinking about it. It might not be for actual books, but have a look. There probably, there might be some on YouTube. I don't know. If they're not legit, I didn't recommend that, but you never know. And then my only other bit of advice in this bit would be charity shops. I have got so many books from charity shops, so cheap. I don't have it, I should have brought it with me upstairs, but I got I don't remember what the book's actually called. It's the last book in the Wolf Hall series. It is massive. It's a big hardback, which I think would probably retail for something close to like 20 quid. And I got it for £2 in a charity shop. It's in good condition. It's absolutely fine. Nothing wrong with it at all. But it's such a good way to get books for a really reasonable price and also help a good cause at the same time of doing it. Obviously, charity shops, you have to put a bit more effort into finding books. You might find the odd charity shop that like there's a person that obviously lives nearby you that has a similar taste to you, so you can kind of go in there and after they've given stuff in, get it. But yeah, you do have to like go around a few to try and find stuff, and sometimes you won't find anything that's for you, and I think it does take a little bit longer to look because you have to look through everything. But I do think it's really worth it because you do save so much money getting books from charity shops, and you also are helping charity, so it's a win-win for everyone, really. Finally, let's talk about motivation. Motivation to read is the one that affects me the most, so I am here with you if you are struggling with this. I feel like motivation can also be the one that's the most difficult to change because there is an element of kind of just forcing yourself to do something. The way motivation works is it's an internal force. We either feel motivated or we don't. The same way as we either feel tired or we don't. We either feel happy or we don't. We either have that motivation or we don't. And motivation can be affected by so many different things. Our energy levels, our mood, the weather, I can't think of anything else, but so many different things can affect our motivation, and it's going to go up and down at different times. That is completely normal. When we fall into a bit of a reading slump though, it might be that motivation is consistently low and we can't do anything. We're not reading. We don't feel like we want to, and therefore we don't. Problem with motivation is quite often it comes from us internally, but it is reinforced by what we do. Let's say I'm in a reading slump. I'm tired, I can't be bothered, I don't want to do it, I'm not reading anything. I might initially feel a little bit better for not reading because I haven't forced myself to do something I don't want to do. But what is then going to happen is I'm going to feel even less motivated to read because I'm not getting the positive reinforcement that reading gives me. So because I haven't done it, I don't remember that I enjoy it and that it makes me feel better. So therefore the next time I try and read, I have that same thought of, oh, I can't really be bothered, I don't want to, I'm just not going to do it. And I don't, and that just then keeps being reinforced. If we do the opposite, and when we feel like we don't want to, we read anyway, then I get that positive reinforcement, I enjoy it, and I'm more likely to then read again the next time. So it's very easy to fall into that negative cycle of motivation decline. I'm not saying it's as easy as just make yourself do it. It's not that easy. But I will just caveat that by saying, you know, that is specifically just if I'm feeling like burnt out from reading, or maybe I'm feeling really low or something like that. If I've been like physically sick or something, and I don't mean like blah sick, I mean like physically unwell or ill, or you know, maybe something's happened, a significant or difficult life event, that's very different. This is more just that day-to-day burnout, lack of motivation, whatever, when it comes to reading more than anything else. So how do we get ourselves to get over that and just do it when we're feeling that lack of motivation? The first thing that I have found so incredibly helpful, and actually is what got me back properly into reading last year, is what I have affectionately called Mega's 10-minute rule. This is a thing that I've been just sort of naturally doing for myself for quite a long time and do quite often recommend to other people when they're sort of experiencing similar things. Essentially it's just committing to doing something for a really short amount of time. The reason I've called it Mega's 10-minute rule is because Kurt Mega from Team Starkid recently talked about this in a stream, and he said this is something he'd been doing, and I've just decided to name it after him because that makes me happy when I think about it and makes me more likely to follow it. Obviously you don't need to call it that, but there we go. It's almost like bargaining with yourself a little bit. Think of, there's like that inner grumpy child part of you that's just like, no, I don't want to, I'm not doing it, I just don't want to, you can't make me. But then there's the sensible part of you that knows that you do want to read and that reading will make you feel better. Think of it as a bargain between those two parts of yourself. Saying I'm just gonna do something for 10 minutes feels so much less overwhelming than I'm gonna read a whole chapter, I'm gonna read for an hour, I'm going to read until I finish this book. That is a big commitment, especially when we're struggling with like reader burnout or lack of motivation, and it's kind of just setting us up to fail. I've said that so many times, but really a lot of the things we naturally try and do to like get ourselves into something can really set ourselves up to fail. Again, this is breaking it down, setting a small goal for yourself. If you only read for 10 minutes, you've still read for the 10 minutes. That's better than nothing. But actually what I'll find quite often is I say I'm just going to read for 10 minutes and I actually end up reading for longer, because when motivation is the problem, it's the starting of something that's difficult, not the actual doing it. Usually actually once you're doing it, you know, and you've been doing it for a while and you're into it, usually you can keep doing it for longer. Depending on the day and how you're feeling, it's not always going to be like that. But the starting it is the hardest part to get over. So if you can find a way to bargain with yourself to get over that, then it makes it easier. And the saying, like setting a short amount of time does that, I think, for me anyway, because I'm like, well, okay, 10 minutes isn't that long. I just got to get through 10 minutes and then I can stop. And a lot of the time, like I say, I don't stop, but if I genuinely want to stop, I can. And I still feel like I've accomplished something and I've still read and achieved my goal. The more we do things when we're struggling with that lack of motivation, the easier it gets. So yeah, initially for like a week or two, I might just be reading for 10 minutes, but eventually that's going to turn into longer the more I do that if I stick to it. It doesn't have to be minutes either. It could be, when I first started doing this last year, actually, I was telling myself I was just going to read 10 pages. And that was what felt achievable to me. You could do less than that, you could do more than that. Don't do loads, like do keep it small. But I told myself I was just gonna read for 10 pages, and like maybe, I don't know, 60% of the time that I was doing that, I would read more than 10 pages. But there were days where I was only reading those 10 pages, but at least I was still reading the 10 pages and getting through the book. That's still progress. So, you know, it was helpful to actually get me back into reading. I think that kind of then comes on to another point of routine and sticking to that. So not everyone is going to want to read every single day or have time to read every single day, and that's completely fine. You know, there are other things that either need doing or that you want to do instead of reading, but routine is so helpful for motivation. One, like I said, the more we do something, the more we get used to it, the easier it gets, the less motivation it actually takes to do it. But secondly, routine for most people just becomes second nature, and you just do it without thinking about it. So if your reading is in a routine, it is easier, it takes less motivation, it's not an additional task, an additional burden, and an additional thing you need to think about. It's just a thing that you do every day, or it's just a thing that you do twice a week. You know, it becomes less of a strain. I say that's helpful for most people because routine on one hand is good for me, but on the other hand is not good for me. I very rarely stick to routines, and if I do get into a routine, one small change to it will mean that routine's completely out, and it just never becomes second nature to me. I never do something without thinking about it. It's not just, oh yeah, now it's time to eat because I eat at this time every day. That's just not how my brain works, and I appreciate other people might experience that as well. So just wanted to say the routine thing can be really helpful and does help with motivation, but I do appreciate it doesn't work that way for everyone. So that might be then more looking at breaking that task down and just making it feel less overwhelming or less as a big task for you. I feel like that didn't really sound very much like it was about reading, but I promise you it was. I hope there has been something in there that has been helpful for you. Even if not every one of the like problems was relevant to you, I'm hoping some of the tips were helpful if you're experiencing a bit of a reading slump or just not feeling like you're reading as much as you could be or would like to be. I just want to reinforce again, do not put too much pressure on yourself. Reading is not a competition. You don't need to be reading hundreds and hundreds of books a year. Read what is comfortable and realistic for you, and make sure you are reading because you enjoy it, not because you feel like you have to be reading for, you know, to reach that goal, or because people on TikTok are, you know, just do it for you. But I hope this has helped in getting you to that place of being able to read as much as you want to, for your own personal enjoyment. If there are any issues or barriers to reading that I've missed, I would be more than happy to revisit this in the future. I actually really enjoyed planning this video and doing it, I think because it's such a familiar thing for me to be talking about. So yeah, if there are any further things around this, or if you have any questions, let me know. I hope that you are all having fantastic days. I hope you're reading good books that you enjoy and that are, you know, giving something back to you. If you're struggling to read at the moment, try some of those things that I've mentioned and let me know if they've helped or not. But I will see you very soon. Bye guys.